As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Today we have a very special returning guest. Joel Salatin, co-founder of Polyface Farms, our activist farmer, is back here with us again on Reluctant Preppers. He's an expert permaculturist. He teaches both multiple families as well as hundreds of interns at his large teaching farm and operating as a clarion call and a nationally recognized speaker for self-reliance, independence, authentic, natural foods, and integrity of restoring health and common sense to our food chain by relying on ourselves and our neighbors and each other in mutually supportive, cooperative communities. Joel, thank you for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. I'm
intrigued by a topic of one of your titles of your speeches, which is called "We're the Antidote for Cultural Maladies." Sometimes people who are wanting to do preparedness think of themselves as preppers and concerned about, and the reason we call ourselves reluctant preppers is because we really wish that it wasn't necessary. We wish it were that somehow society was already had its head screwed on straight, and we didn't feel like we had to swim against the stream and buck the system and feel kind of a growing, gnawing distrust for all the powers that be, and instead kind of reluctantly backed into a position where we think, gosh, it's just necessary for me to sort of take a different route and go a different maybe way from what my neighbors are doing, the people I work with, the people I know, and to really strike out in a new way because of all the concerns and all the risks. And sometimes that can get to be a real negative. We've had some people on here speaking about, how a collapse is imminent, or certainly could be just drastic when it comes and that sort of thing. It's difficult sometimes not to get into a downer of a mentality around that. And yet you remain upbeat, positive, constructive, talking about healing our land, healing our families, healing our culture. So could you help kind of guide us away from that sort of disaster-facing bunker mentality and show us how this can be a healing force as well?
Sure. I mean, yeah. If you watch the media and look at the charts, there's cause for concern. I mean, we're concerned about running out of things. Whether it's running out of energy or soil or air or water. There's a whole running out thing. We live in a hockey stick chart time, and of course, any reasonable person knows that hockey sticks never really survive. Hockey sticks, that's the whole point. They collapse. The
exponential growth curve blows up at some point. Yeah.
Right. Another thing that people, of course, are worried about is just pathogenicity in food, pathogenicity in their lives. MRSA, C. diff in the hospital. I mean, sickness, allergies, autism. I mean, just all this huge amount of just disease and sickness from, diabetes to autism and whatever. And then people are concerned about food. What if a lot of people that look at the industry, they look at all that big machinery and dependence on petroleum, and they're rightly concerned. What if Walmart can't get food this week, and there's a whole chain that has to happen in order for that supermarket to be full. You have to have nations that honor their treaties, and you have to have a merchant marine that works, and the longshoremen can't strike, and a bunch of stuff. And then people are concerned about economic collapse. What happens if the Dow drops to 5,000 and we have 20-30% unemployment, and for a period of time as we rectify the fact that that there are 10 times as much investments right now in derivatives as the entire world's gross domestic product. That's a hockey stick as well, right? So when you go down that list, it's a downer. And so one of the joys of what we do here is that we feel like what we have developed here is an antidote, and the more people embrace the concepts that we offer here, you can take all these things that are downers and realize, well, I maybe not 100% immunity, but you can build an immunity to these things, and I think that's what we're in desperate need of right now. People are looking for, how can I build immunity from all these things? How can I build immunity into my life?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You mentioned in your outline, you said, with national hand-wringing at a fever pitch, the antidote is practical and elegantly simple. So can you just take us through some of those examples?
Sure. Well, let's take maybe the economic one, just because it's one that's on a lot of people's minds right now, because there are a lot of people calling about collapse, and so one of the best antidotes to that is community, where you have expertise. You actually develop people close to you, relationships with people who know how to fix things, how to make things, how to do things. And so here at Polyface and with our customers, we're building this whole community where the equity is in an intellectual and craft capacity, and people don't know their neighbors. People don't know. I mean, good night. You might be living right next to a great mechanic and don't even know it, or somebody who can, build a house or whatever. And so we desperately need to be developing these alliances. I mean, very viscerally, very relationally in our lives. And the beauty of farming. With very little, capitalization, the depreciable capitalization, is that we're not as subject to a lot of the financial institutions as most are. The average farm in America, it takes $4 worth of depreciable infrastructure. That's not, forget the land. That's not the land. That's just the buildings and the machinery. It takes $4 worth of machinery and buildings to turn $1 in annual gross sales. That's 4 to 1. Our ratio is 50 cents to $1. That's an 800% difference in depreciable equity. That fundamentally changes the way the farm can be done, and our beholdenness to to concrete and energy and financial institutions. The other thing is that by farming where our infrastructure is primarily mobile, modular, and management intensive, it allows us to divorce the actual farm business from the land, and so it can be done anywhere in the community. So the beauty of a farm where all the infrastructure is mobile, that means it can be placed anywhere. It can be placed at a neighbor's place. It can be placed, on a park, on some place, it has an easement, public lands, whatever. The point is that you can throw your whole farm, your whole business, if you will, and that's of course part of the being nimble. We say, now we want businesses that are nimble. That what that means is that they're portable, and you don't have to be in a certain place to run it. All you have to do is occupy space. That space can be owned, rented, borrowed, squatted on, whatever. But that really changes the ability to to have a nimble farm is when you don't have stationary infrastructure and all your equity tied up in stationary depreciable stuff. So modular. So all this stuff scales. The beauty of if you want to raise a chicken for Tyson, first thing you've got to build is a $400,000 factory house. If you want to raise chickens like us, you just don't go to the movies for a month, and you can build your little portable floorless shelter, and you don't have to get a building permit. You don't have to get any license. You don't have to turn in a real estate tax records because it's not a machine, it's not a building. Nobody knows what it is, so you don't even have to pay taxes on it, and you can place it anywhere that you can get access to place it. And if things go south with whoever is going to control that, well, you throw it on a trailer and you take it up the road and you put it on another piece of property. So that whole economic idea is so much more malleable and nimble than the industrial farm and food economic model, which depends on all this massive stationary infrastructure. Ours depends much more as a nest, as an embeddedness in a community.
You touched on a minute ago the low capital intensive, and reminded me when I was a kid always being mystified at why my mom was so bitter towards bankers. She got that from her stepdad when she was growing up as a child. They went through the Great Depression, and he was often commenting as he saw the news story after news story after news story about the bankers taking away people's family farms because they couldn't pay their debts. So that the wisdom of making it capital light so that you're not beholden is great wisdom there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also means that if you do lose control of a piece of land, if your infrastructure is portable, you can go anywhere. One of the neatest examples of this I ever saw was ran to a lady. I was doing a conference up in Edmonton in Canada, Alberta, and I met a lady there who several years before she lived in a condominium. I mean, that's a big city. It's whatever it is, 1.5 million people, and she was living in this condominium, but she desperately wanted to farm, but she didn't have any money, and she didn't have any land. And I said, how am I going to do this? And so she did have one friend that had a little backyard. She went to this friend and she said, could I put a little 10-foot by 10-foot garden in your backyard? I want to grow something. I want to, I got this hankering, okay? And her friend said, sure, you can put it in there. Well, she put the little garden in. Well, then this friend's neighbor saw it and was so taken by its beauty and security that she called her and said, you think your friend would put a garden in my backyard? And she said, well, I'll ask, So, of course, she did. And you can see where this is going. Within 18 months, she was farming like 15 backyards, had an employee already. Her whole farm was on her bicycle. She bicycled. She did hand tools. Her entire farm operation was in hand tools that she could move around on a bicycle. And she was a full-time farmer in the middle of Edmonton farming these backyards. So, that's a perfect example. And what it was the landlords, would pay her basically what they would pay for vegetables, and just she grew them for them. They were busy, whatever, professionals, and she was a custom farmer for these clients, and that's been replicated, around the world. But all of these really cutting edge agricultural models now are the opposite extreme of bigness and capitalization and single use infrastructure. They're just amazing. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And another thing that people fear, as I mentioned, is food. Either running out of food or not being able to get good food, being concerned about the kind of food that you get. And so that's why we're huge advocates of knowing your farmer. I tell folks, we don't have a TV. You don't need a TV either. Just go take your deer rifle and shoot the thing, and it'll give you a lot of time to do things, do really important things. The average American male right now, between 25 and 35 years of age, those are millennials. The average American male between 25 and 35 now spends 20 hours a week playing video games. 20 hours a week. So that's enough time to either start a second job, to start a craft, to go to some mechanic school, to start a landscaping business, to at least go into the countryside and find your food treasures, your food source. And the beauty of our customers with us, and we have about 6,000 families that we supply. The beauty of that arrangement is that getting food from us doesn't depend on foreign trade deals. It doesn't depend on ISIS. It doesn't depend on Teamsters not striking, or longshoremen not striking, or any of that stuff. We're quite resilient in that respect. Not 100% immune, but we're as immune as practically possible. From all of those insecurities. And again, we really promote, and we live this way. We believe in the larder. We used to say the word larder, and if I went into your city and said, well, where's all the food? Well, it wasn't in a Costco warehouse. It was in the individual homes lining the street. People canned and dehydrated and froze and had this larder of food. And today, the average person goes to the supermarket, 4 days a week, and the average city only has 3 days worth of food in its markets. 3 days, that's not much. And so, we can like 800 quarts of stuff a season. When Teresa sends me shopping, she gives me the list. I go to the basement. There's applesauce and green beans and sauerkraut, and we even canned chicken and canned beef and canned venison, and you don't even need refrigeration. So if the power goes off, we got all this food in the larder. And I would say one other thing about that, if I can mention a little bit of a spiritual aspect, and that is that in a time when any thinking person has reasons to be fearful and concerned, I think that there's almost nothing as good a salve, if you will, a spiritual salve, an emolument, if you will, as lying down with your beloved at night, proximate to this larder of food that you have, acquired from farms that maybe you've canned it yourself, you've dehydrated it, you've processed it, you've put it up, you know where it's from, and you have a relationship with where it's coming from, and I think that's a true security and a true connectiveness to the abundance of the earth, and it allows us to lie down at night amidst abundance rather than scarcity, and that's a good thing. That lets you wake up in the morning refreshed and happy and ready to go, as opposed to paranoid, fearful, and wondering, what today is going to bring.
I can totally relate. Even to people who've grown up in the city and are used to getting most of their food from the supermarket, that sort of thing. That experience of a big blizzard is coming, and yet you just got home with your load of food and you've laid in, your pantry is full. I can totally relate to on a urban scale what that's similar to, and then also to relate that when we did have some serious winter storms, the last couple of winters here, I got photos from our local very large supermarket with the shelves pretty much picked clean and an armed guard at the door, so armed police officer standing at the door. So it when you talk about a thin supply chain that's just barely covering over empty larders all over the city, that's really true.
Yeah. Well, if you look at that, if you look at all the things that have to line up, from credit to business, relations, and all the things have to line up in order for that supermarket to have those things in it. It's like a big complex clock. It's actually pretty fragile, as opposed to all that has to happen in order for you to go out to the farm that you've been dealing with for 2 years already. And where you have a relationship and get your food. I can tell you our customers are going to eat, a long time compared to others. And so, that's cool. One of the other, of course, fears or concerns is just, pathogenicity, sickness. Both human sickness, pathogenicity in food from, Salmonella, E. coli, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, whatever. And I'll just do a real quick overview of that. If you wanted to make a farm that was really pathogenic, where everything was sick and it was bad, well, what would you do? Well, first of all, you would only raise one thing because, we don't want confused pathogens. That makes them not as effective. So we're going to raise one thing, and then we're going to crowd that thing together as tightly as we can crowd it, whether it's, lettuce in a field or chickens in a house. But we're going to crowd all that together real tightly, one species. And then, for animals, we're going to deny them fresh air and sunshine, put a roof over them, and make sure they don't get fresh air and sunshine. And then we're going to feed them a minimalistic diet, just enough to be able to put on fat. We're not going to let them exercise. They run off all their calories exercising, so that wouldn't be any good. Besides, exercise is really healthy for you, so we're not going to let them exercise anywhere. We're not going to let them have any salad at all. We're gonna just give them calories. And anyway, you see where I'm heading with this. And then, of course, we're gonna give them drugs because now they're so sick. We've got to give them drugs all the time. That'll destroy their immune system, and so now they're dependent on drugs. And what I'm describing, it almost sounds like something the devil would come up with, if he was trying to come up with something that would make a terrible system. And of course, what I've described is modern American agriculture. And so, how do we eliminate this stuff? The Government Accounting Office is amazing. Even the government got this right. Government Accounting Office 15 years ago commissioned a study when foodborne bacteria illness was rampant, really starting to get worse and worse. And so they commissioned a study and said, well, what causes this? And what they found were centralized, large-scale centralized farms. They found large-scale centralized processing facilities like slaughterhouses, canneries, batch operations, things like that. Long distance, number 3, long distance transportation. And number 4 was subtherapeutic feeding of antibiotics. Well, amazingly, those 4 things are exactly the reason that we have the problems that we do in our food. Now, you would think that was done so long ago. Surely, if they said, well, here are the vulnerabilities, I think that was the actual word they used, the vulnerabilities of the system that made it vulnerable to pathogenicity. If they identified those, then wouldn't you think that official government policy would be, well, let's do a food and farming system that's opposite of this? Well, what would a food and farming system that's opposite of large centralized farms be? Oh, guess what? It would be a whole lot of small, decentralized family farms, community integrated, blah, blah, blah. What would be the opposite of large-scale centralized processing facilities? Well, it would be cottage industry, home business, community-scale facilities as opposed to these, mega-scale outfits. And what would be the opposite of long-distance transportation? Well, goodness, that's a hard one. But you can come up with the opposite. I think it's something to do with local, and so that would be local. And then the fourth is subtherapeutic antibiotic feeding. Well, let's just produce animals so that they fill their natural habitat and have a healthy immune system, which of course is what we do with either deep bedding if they're housed. Or mainly it's out on pasture, or we're moving them every day or two to a brand new paddock, and we don't have to worry about that. I mean, it's not that difficult, and the beauty is that what I'm describing doesn't mean that we have to sacrifice productivity because we're producing way more per square yard or per acre than anybody else, because we are mimicking nature's patterns like multi-speciation and symbiosis, synergism, complex relationships, and perennials instead of annuals, and all sorts of cool things like that. So the idea that you have to have pathogenicity in order to have an efficient food system or to have affordable food is simply not true. And on that point, affordability of good food, yeah, our food does carry a little higher price tag than what's in the store. But we're not going to give anybody diarrhea, and we're not going to give anybody E. coli or salmonella or mad cow or any of these other things.
Right. That gets back to the idea of you're never seeing the all-in cost when you just look at the sticker price in the store, as far as what your health is going to be, the abundance of life, your real resilience, your the health of your immune system, etc. And then also the fallout costs on the environment and the cleanup and the other people that are impacted by that. We had when we had our last two of our 5 children born at home, doula was an assistant lady who came in and helped us out with caring for mom and caring for the house for a long time after the baby was born. And her husband worked at a natural foods co-op, and they had been previously handling both what they call organic vegetables and fruits as well as non-organic, or so-called conventional, although I don't see why you can call it conventional rather than experimental. But he got sensitized to where if he handled and touched like the quote-unquote conventional bananas, he would get a rash, a real skin illness. But as long as he was touching organics, no problem. And he worked in the produce department there.
Right. Well, that story has been repeated over and over. One of the most interesting things that we learned when we started selling chickens to restaurants was that in the prep room they have a malady called sore hand syndrome. Your skin is porous, and industrial chicken has so many toxins in it that if you handle it very long, you got wet hands and porous skin, and then those toxins kind of come in, and you get this sore hand syndrome. It feels like you get arthritis, and so generally in the prep room, they don't handle chicken but a couple hours a day in order to not get sore hand syndrome. And And lo and behold, here when these restaurants would get our chicken, well, they could handle it for all day, and nobody ever got sore hands. And the first chef that came to us on this, she said, first time they got chickens, the prep help, of course, they were all Hispanics, mainly speaking Spanish. But anyway, they came running in from the prep room, wiggling their fingers and their hands in the air. They hadn't taken their break. They missed their break because they weren't tired, they weren't sore, and they were wiggling their fingers up, kind of like a praise service, right? Saying, "Look, man, no sore hands, and we'd never heard of this, and it was amazing. So the truth is that life is actually pretty complex. There are a lot of dependencies, and goodness, while we're talking about, you mentioned the cost of pollution, all those sorts of things. Those are called by people like us externalized costs, and of course, those externalized costs are not captured in the price at the supermarket. Whether it's your case of diarrhea or whether it's the fish kill, on the Neuse River in North Carolina from the pig factories, and I think it's really important to note that in our culture, we think we're really clever and smart and all this stuff, but I find it fascinating that if I pollute something, if I pollute a river, that is actually not a liability against our gross domestic product. That goes in as an asset because the cost of cleanup is economic activity.
It's more economic activity, that's right.
It's like, good, let's build more jails, let's have more juvenile delinquent centers. It's just amazing that we don't have an accounting system to actually capture the societal economic drain of everything from increased autism, which is now definitely being linked to glyphosate, which of course has quintupled in use since genetically modified organisms. Roundup Ready that's glyphosate, or Roundup Ready soybeans, and so these things. What's the cost? What's the cost of one case of autism? I mean, it's huge, and yet in our system, we put all the cost of the doctor visits, all the cost of the remediation, all the cost of the family of care and help. We call all that cost economic activity. It's all positive. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that we don't have an accounting system to put the negatives that are negatives, to put them on. If we did that, we wouldn't look quite as good as we look.
And those healthy alternatives that currently seem unaffordable would seem like a bargain in comparison, contrast. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about price, because that's always on people's minds. Here's the thing. I mean, I'm sure many of your of the folks here with reluctant preppers have seen or familiar with the documentary Food Inc. And of course, Food Inc. was huge. When it came out, it's still actually being shown quite a lot. And it's a great documentary, but there's one really, weakness in it. I call it the narrative myth, if you will, and it's got that family in there, that won't that says they can't afford produce because they don't have enough money, and they stopped at Burger King, to get a great big, burger and a 2-gallon soda drink and French fries and stuff. Well, I know what that costs. I mean, I don't eat it or buy it, but I know what it costs. And the first time I saw it, I was sitting in my seat, watching that, and I said, "Good night." That family could buy 2 whole pounds of our world-class grass-finished ground beef. There's more nutrition in a quarter pound of that than in that whole Burger King meal, but that's beside the point. The point is they could get 2 whole pounds of our meat for the cost of that Burger King meal. The only difference is they have to cook it, and which means you have to, turn off the TV and actually, think a little bit about life. And so the number one way that you can eat well without costing so much is to purchase raw material and use your own kitchen gadgets to do it. And when I say prepare it in your home, people go, oh, I don't have time, blah, blah, blah. Listen, we've got every kind of convenience in the world. I mean, you got a tap that has hot and cold running water. You have to go to a spring like Grandma did. People thinking when I say use your kitchen that I'm relegating them to some barbaric Neanderthal Ludditism like washboards, hoop skirts, and hearth cooking. But that's not the case. We have every kind of techno gadgetry you can imagine, from bread makers to Cuisinarts to timed bake to refrigerators and crispers and slicer, dicer, whatever, blenders. I mean, we can do all sorts of cool things. I mean, crock pots. I mean, that's our favorite thing in the kitchen is a crock pot. I mean, you throw stuff in there frozen in the morning, you run out, and it just sits there on 40 watts a day, just sitting there, bubbling and all day long. Less than a 40-watt light bulb, and you come back in the evening and you can eat at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. It doesn't burn, it doesn't get dry, and it just sits there and bubbles all day long. I mean, it's a wonderful tool. So you can eat like kings if you buy unprocessed. Processed food, from Hot Pockets to DiGiorno's frozen pizza, processed food is expensive. That's the truth. And if you took all that money in processed food and got unprocessed, and then actually built home centricity into your food system, you can eat better than a king on way less money, and that's the truth, and that's the thing I think we need to be honest about and promote.
Trying to think, you've talked about financial obligation and indebtedness. You've talked about scalability. You've talked about portability. You've talked about immunity from the fragile supply chain. You've talked about safety from illnesses in general and foodborne illnesses in particular. You've talked about the integrity of the food as far as being free from chemicals that are going to make you sick. Anything else? Yeah,
well, the other one that I mentioned at the top of the program, I've taken these kind of in reverse order that I mentioned them to you, was the first one was running out of things. That we're just into a time of scarcity. This isn't necessarily food, but just scarcity. Energy, soil, potable water, aquifers are going down. We've got droughts, desertification going all over the planet. Don't want to get in a big argument about global warming and climate change and all that. But that certainly is something that's on people's minds, and so the whole thing of running out of things, and so one of the beauties of the way the planet actually works is that solar energy comes onto the planet, and photosynthesis, plants convert that solar energy into biomass. Into what happens is the plant inhales carbon dioxide. It splits off the carbon, puts that in tissue and fiber and carbohydrates. That's the carbon part of carbohydrates, and exhales. In doing so, it exhales then the oxygen, and of course that's what we breathe. And we exhale the carbon dioxide, and it all goes around. Here's the deal: the planet, the Earth, is not a reluctant partner. We have this notion, I think, too often that that the earth is a reluctant partner. We have to get it in a horse collar, and do a half Nelson and get pretty rough with it. I'm going to make you do, and then we've got to wrestle, with the earth as a reluctant partner. When the truth is that the earth is a loving partner, and responds to our caress. And the amazing thing is that it actually wants to be a very abundant, productive partner. But we need to treat it more like a lover and not like a conquistador. And so, when we're talking about running out of things, when we talk about, for example, soil, one of the everything on the earth is completely dependent on the soil, and it's as thin as the orange pigment. If an orange were the earth, the orange pigment on the skin is the soil. And that's all that separates us from complete starvation and disaster, and complete ecosystem collapse. So we better be interested about how do we build soil. And the truth is that we build soil with perennials, not annuals. Perennials being plants like grass and asparagus in the garden, things that you don't have to plant all the time, bushes and trees and all that, as opposed to annuals, which are, for example, all the cultivated grain crops, cultivated vegetables, and that you have to plant each season, each year. And so all the deep soils on the earth were developed under perennials, not annuals. Nature actually doesn't have very many annuals because there's nobody to till it. So nature relies primarily on perennials. And interestingly, in our country, we subsidize or give crop insurance not for any perennials. And don't misread, don't say I think we should have it. I don't think the government should be involved in agriculture at all. Basically, every time the government gets involved with something, it messes it up. So whether it's education or medicine or agriculture or whatever. So I'm not advocating government involvement. All I'm saying is that all of the involvement that the government incentivizes is not for perennials. It's all for annuals. So our at its most fundamental level, our entire farm program, agriculture policy in the country incentivizes soil destruction. And so the beauty of a pasture-based animal system is the other thing that animals do that is true about nature, perennials. How do perennials work? Perennials go through a life cycle too, and they go through senescence and then decay. So nature, so what we've got are herbivores, yaks and camels and cows and bison and wildebeests and caribou and zebras and elephants. All these herbivores are on the planet in order to prune back the grass as it goes towards senescence and restart its rapid juvenile growth cycle, thereby increasing the amount that any square yard of plants, increasing the amount of solar energy that square yard can metabolize into biomass. The Earth really wants to be on a weight gain program. It wants to be gaining weight every year, not losing weight. I mean, that is true. They say matter can't be destroyed, but matter can be, at least from the Earth's ecosystem standpoint, as long as that sun shines, it's flooding the Earth with energy, and that energy is supposed to be captured by vegetation. And if that vegetation captures all that solar energy and converts it into biomass, then that is what actually builds soil in its decay process and as manure out of the back end of animals. One of the reasons the earth has so many herbivores is because the digestion of an herbivore is so perfect, it speeds up things. You know, everybody knows that compost piles are wonderful. Well, you know, nature doesn't have compost piles. So how is a compost pile natural? Well, the reason it's natural is because it utilizes the principles of nature. It doesn't adulterate or compromise or anything. It uses the principles of nature and simply speeds those up so the recycling can happen faster. Well, boy, if you think that's good, look at the digestion of a cow, of an herbivore. You know, it's never too hot or cold. It's never not moist enough or too dry. It never, you know, has too much light to kill microorganisms. I mean, it's like Goldilocks' porridge, you know, it's the little bear's porridge. It's just right all the time. It's exactly the right temperature, exactly the right moisture, and exactly the right amount of, you know, the right habitat for fast digestion. So what would decompose in 6 months on a compost pile decomposes in 24 hours in the rumen of an herbivore. And that, my dear friends, is exactly why there are so many herbivores and why all the deep soils on the earth were developed not under forests and not under shrubs and bushes, but under prairies with these massive migratory choreographed mobs of herbivores running across them. Now, we don't have those today. We have the land divvied up in private ownership, and you know, the wolves are gone, and if you start a fire, the fire department comes out and puts it out. So we don't have that kind of raw movement, that raw choreography across the landscape. So how do we duplicate it? Well, we duplicate it with real high-tech electric fencing and water pipe and portable shelter. So on our farm, we have 6 miles of portable water pipe. So instead of the animals having to go to a stream to drink, we bring the stream to them. And thank God that we now have, we've used our intellectual capacity and mechanical ability with our opposing thumbs to innovate things that allow us to duplicate, to biomimic this kind of choreography. Even if you only own an acre, you can move these things around. And so on our farm, when we say we're moving animals, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this migratory choreography. Now, they're not going between Ontario and Florida. They're just staying here on the farm, but they're moved around in the same kind of mobbed sequence that they would have been, 500 years ago. And that's exactly what we're talking about. I mean, 500 years ago, Audubon, he was not 500 years ago, but a couple centuries ago, Audubon sat under a tree and documented that he couldn't see the sun for 3 days because of the birds flying over him. It's probably passenger pigeons, which are extinct now. But imagine the size of a flock of birds that would blot out the sun for 3 days. First Nations peoples have legends of where birds would come in and land in a forest and roost next to a village overnight and get up in the morning and look out, and all the trees are broken down. All they are just trunk spires standing up, and there's an inch of bird poop on the ground. I mean, that's a big flock of birds. Captain Jim Bridger, when he was sent out to scope out the Black Hills for the first time, he said he got behind a herd of 7 million bison, and if they hadn't been carrying oats for their horses, they'd all starved to death because there wasn't enough forage even to feed the horses behind this herd of bison. And of course, the bison, with their horns, they wallered out big slows, the Little House on the Prairie, SLOUGHS, that were big, pocks, great big dust baths in the landscape that then formed all these wonderful water basins. When it did rain, it hydrated the landscape. 500 years ago, up to 8% of North America was underwater. They were beaver ponds. Down in the Southwest, in Texas, New Mexico, Nevada, massive, massive beaver ponds. You read the Last of the Mohegans, and everywhere they went, they could run everywhere, just portaging a little bit between beaver ponds. And they could navigate everywhere in a canoe on these beaver ponds. So, here's the point, that 500 years ago, there were more pounds of animals in what is today the U.S. than there is today, even with John Deere tractors, hybridization, chemical fertilizers, and factory farms. That should give us all pause that if we could just unleash the natural patterns of nature, we would not have to worry about scarcity. The abundance would be so much that we'd be wallowing in abundance. Using these principles on our farm, we average 400 cow days per acre. A cow day is what one cow will eat in a day. So what you're eating today is one person day of food. So in our county, the average is 80 cow days per acre. We're averaging 400 cow days per acre, and we've never planted a seed or bought a bag of chemical fertilizer in 55 years. So just imagine if the neighbor would do that, and his neighbor would do that, and the whole county would do that, and the whole state would do that. I mean, the sheer abundant capacity of the earth, I mean, we're talking about running out of stuff. Goodness, with these kinds of models, with our technology of electric fencing and water pipe and stuff, so that we can tweak it a little bit. But with those kind of things, goodness, the carrying capacity of the planet could go up, 4 or 5 times and not even think about it. That's the truth. That's the abundant future that can be had, and that's a future that's not dependent on petroleum. It's not dependent on even hybridization or laboratories or anything. It's completely dependent on us having enough humility to understand how ecology actually functions, and then duplicate it using the technology that allows us to come as a humble partner, as opposed to a rapist pillaging the natural patterns that we have.
Yeah, 2 anecdotes that come to mind for me. One, when we moved into the big metro where we used to live, and went into this mega store, grocery store, the huge agriculture, the produce department there, I was asking the produce department worker where the organic section was, and I found this tiny little organic section, and he was shaking his head and muttering, just frustratingly saying, if people think this organic stuff is so great, they're willing to pay twice as much for it. He says, I tell you one thing, he says, if all the farmers raised things organic, we would starve. People would starve. There wouldn't be enough food to go around. And that was his paradigm, and that's what he believed. And secondly, some friends of ours who took their kids to the county fair, where if the kids could catch a pig, they bring the piglet home, greased pig catching contest. I don't know if I told you about that before, but because of humane reasons now, they can't grease the pigs. They grease the children instead. They put axle grease on the children's hands. So anyway, they catch the 3 of them caught piglets, brought them home, and they went into the local grain co-op to buy sacks of pig feed, and they were all ready for them because the co-ops have this all timed together with the county fairs, and they had this whole package. You come back day after day, week after week, buy 100-pound bag, 100-pound bag, 100-pound bag of pig feed. And I kept saying to my friend, why don't you just go by the grocery stores and the restaurants in town and say, listen, I've got to feed some pigs. Can I just have your scraps or whatever? And he said, you can't do that. I got to get high protein, this and that and the other. And really believed that they had to shell out all this money to buy commercial chemical and so on feed to feed these pigs.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect example of where we have come with our segregated food system, where nothing is integrated. I mean, people didn't used to, bring sacks of feed to pigs. Pigs were run in the woods. They were run in what are called nooks and crannies. They were basically salvage operations. I mean, in the alpine meadows of Switzerland, pigs were raised on the whey from the cheese making, and so the farmer, instead of having to carry the milk and down the mountain, turn the milk into cheese, which is of course a lot more nutrient dense and less weight, to carry down off the mountain, and and brought the prosciutto down, right? So, or charcuterie or whatever, salami and stuff, and that was a lot lighter than bringing the pigs down the mountain. And so the efficiency, the sheer efficiency of integrating food systems. I mean, the goodness, get a couple of chickens, throw out the dog, the cat, the boa constrictor, and the gerbil, and get 2 chickens for your household. I mean, get a glorified parakeet cage, and you're in business. They eat all the kitchen scraps, give you eggs, and you don't have to worry about filling the landfill with garbage, and it's a fundamentally integrated system. This was the role of things, for most of humanity. The fact that we have now divorced ourselves and segregated our food systems from these historic normalities doesn't indicate progress. It indicates incredible, foolishness, arrogance, and a Star Trek nirvana idea that we can levitate ourselves and sever our ecological umbilical, and sail off into some cosmic nirvana where we just drink a little bit of colored something or other and take a tablet and we've eaten.
Are there any other ways that we can heal or immunize ourselves against the I would say unnatural risks to our family's wealth and well-being and health through wiser living with our food supply?
Well, of course, I'm a huge advocate. When people ask me, well, what can we do? I'm a huge advocate of doing something yourself. Whether it's, there are now these amazing. We just got one here. Actually, a guy dropped it off. It's made in North Carolina. It's a barrel. It starts with a 55-gallon plastic barrel, and I think it has like 50 slots in the side, little cups where he's melted it and kind of made a little cup holder. You fill that thing up with compost. Got a central pillar. You fill it up with compost and put water in it, and that just dribbles out compost tea out to these plants. And you can grow like 50 plants in this thing in a barrel. And because it's plastic and translucent, you don't have to turn it. The sunlight somehow dances around the translucent and gives everything sunlight, even if it's on the north side. Anyway, the sheer volume of plants that you can grow in these stackable little gardens now on a patio is unbelievable. The south side of your house can be completely a solarium. I'm a huge believer in solariums on the south side of houses. Not only does that generate heat for you in the wintertime, but it also is a place you can grow plants in the summertime. Listen, if all the diesel fuel right now currently used to transport winter, mesclun mix and peppers and tomatoes from the San Joaquin Valley and Guatemala up here to the frost areas, if all that petroleum were put into plastic for solariums on the south side of houses, we would be food independent. We wouldn't need all those diesel trucks, traversing, and we'd have heat for our houses. We have a solarium on our house. Our house is an old American chestnut log cabin built in 1790, but we have a state-of-the-art, real pretty greenhouse, and we can eat greens in January. This is not that difficult. You don't have to rewire the house or call a plumber or anything. This is just basic, basic stuff. So participating in this whole, food process, not only lets you eat better, but, you actually develop a sense of seasonal cycles and rhythms. The next thing you know, you're having too much. So then you're starting to experiment with, well, how do we preserve it? And it just it moves you forward in the whole agenda. So that's very cool. And one final, if you have teenagers in the house, there's no better role model than a couple of chickens, because chickens wake up early in the morning, every morning. They wake up, they're the first thing up in the morning. They spend all day turning trash into treasure, turn garbage into eggs. And then as soon as it starts getting dark, they're going to find somewhere to sleep. They don't go out on the town at night. You don't have to worry about them, getting in trouble. So if you have teenagers, chickens are absolutely the best role model you can have for your teens. So take a note. That's a good resiliency thing too. To not be worried about where your teenagers are going.
Well, Joel Salatin, co-founder of Polyface Farms and our activist farmer here on Reluctant Preppers, we are always grateful to have you back. We'd love to have you back again to talk with us about many of the other topics that we had to pick and choose very carefully to come up with this one for tonight, because there were so many others we wanted to cover with you, and we'll have to save those for future visits. But always glad to have you back on our channel, and just thanks for joining us, Joel.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.